Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Polite Society podcast for Monday, the 15th of November, 2021. Guys, I kind of 2020, 2021, it's the year that won't end. Yeah.
Don't start singing it.
Exactly. We're going to be recording PSP, and by the way, I hope to have audio PSP episodes going out this week. There was an issue after my stroke, and things fell by the wayside, a lot of things, and that's one of them. And I hope to have the audio episodes going back out this week. So next week, by Thursday, you ought to be able to pick up audio episodes if you aren't right now. Oops.
I hate it when the doctor says, oops.
No. I'm trying to get Facebook find post. I'm trying to get the social commentary on so that we can see what people are saying and respond to it. And we've already got comments coming in. Pete says, "Whoops, that's not the right one. Why did that not come through? Because I've got it on the wrong one. We want that one. View and send it." Dana says watching, but I doubt I'll comment. And
I'm just glad you're breathing, Dana.
Yeah, absolutely. And greetings, Robert. Hopefully, good Robert. News coming about New Jersey here in the as soon as the Supreme Court decides to actually do their job and release their.
Aren't we talking about 8 or 9 months from now?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
I want to check.
All right, I exaggerated. 7 or 8.
Yeah, but it's been years for Jersey.
Yeah, because Jersey's going to go, and Rob, I get this from Rob because he's the one that initially said, yeah, Lathrop, it's probably going to go our way, but what's going to happen is New Jersey is going to say, okay, this is the absolute bare minimum we can do and stay legal, and it won't even be that because we're still going to have to sue them to bring them to really legal. Mm-hmm. So, all right, because we're 3 minutes after the hour, and I've been done nothing but babble. Should we actually try to do a recording here?
If not, I was going to, start telling really bad jokes until Charlie started his comedy routine.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's do this. I'm going to have Mass bring us in 5, 4, 3.
Hey gang, this is Masad Ayub from the Pro Arms Podcast. I'm here to remind you that our podcast is a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network, and I'm going to suggest you do what we do and check out the other podcasts at selfdefenseradio.net.
Treat every firearm as if it's loaded.
Never point a firearm at anything you're not willing to kill or destroy.
Keep your finger off the trigger until you are on target and ready to fire.
Always be sure of your target and what lies beyond it.
Hi, and welcome to the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. We're recording this one on Monday, November the 15th, 2021. I'm Paul Lathrop.
I'm Rob Morris, and on tonight's show we'll talk with Chris Cheng about his Asian American gun owners and his outreach in Recoil magazine.
I'm John Richardson, and we'll talk about the closing arguments in the Rittenhouse case.
I'm Charlie Cook, and we'll talk about bringing a samurai sword to a gunfight. So climb aboard,
strap in,
and hang on.
Episode 601 of the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society podcast starts right now. Well, if it's Monday night, that means it's time for Polite Society Podcast, even if we got the thing rolling about 3 minutes late. Welcome, everybody. And as I usually do about this time, about 3 minutes ago, I would ask Rob, what's been up with you since the last time you've been on Polite Society, bud?
It's been a quiet week. I was on Bill Frady's Lock and Load radio show. I recorded another episode of Self-Defense Gun Stories, carried every day, did some dry practice. John, did you get a chance to go hunting yet? What's up with that?
I have not been hunting since October.
Oh, wow.
We've been traveling. But I was a guest on Eye of the Target Radio with Rob and Amanda yesterday. We talked about the NRA. In other news, I found out that my request for media credentials for the Safari Club International Convention has been approved. That will save me like $100 per day entrance fee. Yeah. And as it is the same week as the SHOT Show, I'm going to really try to cover both. And now I'm just waiting on the Dallas Safari Club to open up their media registration. So it looks like January 2022 will be a very busy month for me.
Now, did your press credentials for the porn convention come back yet?
No, they were asking for money and I'm too cheap. But maybe Charlie got them. I don't know.
I'll never tell. I will never give up my porn name or my OnlyFans page. So I've had gun related this week. I've had a Utah class this past weekend at a gun store that I used to give classes at. And I also did a basic pistol class on Sunday. And then late in the week, I did a riding shotgun road trip down to Virginia, and I filmed 3 shows while I was down there. Paul, how about yourself?
For me, it's been just daily bullets, getting the weekly bullet ready to rock. And by the way, if you've been waiting for the weekly bullet to come back, this Saturday is when it does. This coming Saturday, the weekly bullet is back on track. We're going to be broadcasting at noon Central Time on Saturday. Teresa Einacker of CNJFO is going to be on. We will probably be talking about the Rittenhouse verdict because I expect that to be coming in the next day or two. They are, as we speak, they're still giving closing arguments. And if you catch us on podcast when it releases Wednesday or Thursday, they may still be giving closing arguments. But I expect those closing arguments to, when they finish, to get a very quick jury verdict back. So, but just really for gun-related stuff, for me, it's just been around work, getting the broadcasts all lined back up and getting everything working the way it's supposed to be. And I don't, my press credentials are here for SHOT Show, or the credentials themselves aren't, but I've been approved. And I am in a position I've never been in for SHOT Show before. I don't have to worry about travel. It's all being planned for me. The people at SAF are doing it. All I have to do is say, yep, I'll be at the airport at this time. And yeah, I am actually going to fly, believe it or not. So, well, we are getting great comments coming in. Let me get to a couple of them before we go off to the news segment. Diane says, "Hi, John. Loved your interview last night on Eye on the Target. Great show."
Thank you, Diane.
And Robert says, "Arguments are done, and the jury comes back in tomorrow morning." So by tomorrow, by the time the Daily Bullet happens at 5 p.m. Central Time tomorrow, we could have a verdict. So
I got to say, I can't wait for the verdict, because if Kyle Rittenhouse is convicted or if he's found guilty, either way, I think I'm going to go outside and flip my car over.
Set it on fire, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. I think we're all good there. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's step aside for our first break. We've got normally right after our first break, we go straight into interview. Chris Cheng asked for a little bit of extra time, so we're going to go ahead and do our news segment when we come back. And then after that news segment, we'll have our interview with Chris Cheng. So hang on, everybody. We're going to hear from SAF, and they'll be right back with our news segment.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have vowed to take away your Second Amendment rights through gun bans, gun confiscation, and government regulations. Now, Joe Biden is no longer hiding his real intentions, and we need you to take action now.
Whether it's a 9mm pistol or whether it's a rifle is ridiculous. I'm continuing to push to eliminate the sale of those things. But
the Biden administration is coming after your right to own any gun, and we need you to text PROTECT2A to 474747 now. Joe Biden has already issued executive orders. He is now demanding Congress push through radical gun legislation. You can fight back to stop Joe Biden's gun grab, but you must text PROTECT2A to 474747. Take action to protect your right to keep and bear arms. We urgently need millions of Americans to text PROTECT2A to 474747. Again, text PROTECT2A to 474747 right now.
Okay, we are back. And leading the news, of course, is the Rittenhouse trial. And as happened a while back, when we did a Daily Bullet, we had people commenting just as Amanda and I did a Daily Bullet, I believe it was Friday of last week. And as we were getting ready to cover a topic, we get comments coming in talking about the topic we were going to start covering. And I think we've got people that are just as clairvoyant watching tonight, because Rodney Klein says, how bad did the prosecutor look brandishing the AR in the courtroom with his finger on the trigger? Oh.
Yep.
We all want to jump on it. Go ahead.
No, you taught the class. What did you tell your students this weekend, right?
Exactly. I can't believe that this guy hasn't learned anything from Alec Baldwin. I mean, come on. For 3 weeks, we talked about how you shouldn't point a gun at people. You shouldn't put your finger on the trigger. And what does he do? He has someone else check that the gun's unloaded, and then he puts his finger on the trigger and points it at the courtroom. Unbelievable.
With the bolt down.
Yeah. Well, the deputy told me it was unloaded.
Exactly.
Right. Deputy, armorer, whatever, assistant director, whatever.
I did hear, this is terribly serious. The part that left me most upset about the trial was the way Gross Close, all the charges against Gross Close were dropped 3 days before Gross Close gave testimony. That smells to high heaven of tampering with with witnesses. And all I can conclude is that the prosecution is the punishment. This is a political trial where they knew they had no case. They're trying to beat the kid up so badly that everyone's afraid to defend themselves.
Yeah.
I think you're right. And, they attacked him for crying on the stand. My thought is it would be quite understandable if he actually has PTSD. I would be surprised if he didn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
And the only good news I heard today was the judge actually did dismiss the charge about carrying a firearm as a minor.
That was the only one I was worried about. The prosecution bent over backwards to prove the other ones weren't convictable. I mean, the other charges are absolutely.
Paul, yeah. I heard something about that. Shall I jump on there?
Go for it.
The comment was they wanted to confuse the jury. The sad point is the four of us count as experts because we've followed this issue for years. Okay, the jury doesn't know justifiable self-defense from anything. And so the prosecutor has a reasonable chance of giving bad enough evidence that might convict Kyle, even though it's not convictable. The thought being, oh, you lose your right of self-defense if you break the law, you're no longer an innocent party, and Rittenhouse carried a gun illegally. That was a Hail Mary prosecution strategy, but he had nothing else.
Right.
Friday, I was coming home from Virginia, and I stopped and got gas, and the radio came on, and it was a talk radio station, and the host had a number of people on, and they were all talking about how Rittenhouse had white privilege, because if it were a black teenager with an AR, he would have been shot by the police, and all sorts of other stuff. And I waited for a few calls, and then I got the phone number, and I called in. And I really wanted to slam this guy and say, listen, everything you're talking about is ridiculous. You're saying that it's an active shooter situation. It's not an active shooter situation. You're talking about how Grosskreutz, I'm not sure that's not his name, and I'm sure I'm badgering it, but you're saying he didn't have a gun, but he did have a gun, and he pointed it at Rittenhouse, and we can see this in the video, and he started to compare apples to oranges. He said, listen, if somebody stole a car and they drove over 3 people, it would be murder. I'm like, that's not even the same thing. That's not even the same thing. He shot these people in self-defense. And he's like, he was worried about them taking the gun away, and he had a sling on that gun, so the gun couldn't be taken away from him. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. And then he hung up on me.
Yeah, have you ever heard of a knife, dude?
Yeah.
He could have cut the sling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's amazing, well, Paul, you were right. In the end, the prosecutor's arguments were, you didn't need to shoot because 2 of the 3 men were unarmed. One of them tried to kick me in the head. Somebody did hit me from behind, knock me down to the ground. I don't know who it is. I turn around, I'm on my butt, and a guy's swinging a skateboard for my head. That's called disparity of force. Go ahead, Charlie.
The whole thing is disparity of force. There was one guy that was chasing him that had a rock in his hand that tried hitting him and knocked his hat off. And you're just like, oh my God, I can't believe it's not disparity of force. This guy's surrounded by people that want to kick his tail. And he showed an unbelievable amount of restraint by not emptying his magazine.
Isn't that amazing?
He didn't
Charlie,
shoot randomly.
You're getting chased by a crowd, right? He's the poster boy for restraint.
He really is. He really is. He didn't, he didn't shoot at the armed guy until he pointed a gun at him. The other guys were attacking him. He only shot them. He wasn't shooting randomly. There was some video tonight that after he shot all 3 of the guys, he got up and started to go in the other direction, and there were shots that were fired, and he just kept going in the opposite direction. Unbelievable amount of strength by the 17-year-old guy with a rifle.
Let me get a couple of comments in here. Pete says, I hope he's found innocent. He clearly defended his life. Diane said, the prosecutor said a skateboard can't be used as a deadly weapon. He said, I guess Santa Claus brings a deadly weapon to children. I would challenge that prosecutor to stand there as Jose Canseco swings at him with one.
Yeah.
Now, hold on a second. Didn't Jose Canseco shoot himself in the hand?
Yeah, so he ought to be on the prosecutor's side, right? Then Pete came back with another good one. A full metal jacket doesn't make bullet armor piercing as steel core does. What kind of bullets are we supposed to use according to this prosecutor? Because the hollow points are like nuclear warheads that explode on impact, and yet the full metal jackets are meant to go through things like tanks.
Nerf bullets, Paul. Styrofoam Nerf bullets.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Less than lethal.
Less than lethal, for sure. You can't have a fully automatic Nerf gun, though.
All right. And Rodney says, and now Kenosha is bracing for chaos following the decision. So leftist media blows up the situation, gaslighting, pushing lies that, and where are we at? That fit the narrative, and now they're bracing for chaos if the jury delivers the proper verdict. Yeah.
Did you hear the clever comment about that, where they activated the National Guard, and you went, isn't this like half a year too late? Because if they'd done that when they should have, we wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Right. They'll let out the National Guard on a court decision, but not when people are burning down car dealerships.
Right.
Wow. Going back, and I'm going back to some older ones here. Robert says, speaking of the AR-15 being held by the prosecutor with the finger on the trigger, they're trying to show the jury what it was like to work with Alec Baldwin on a movie set.
Well, you know what? The defending attorney, Rittenhouse's attorney, he ended up picking up the rifle, and he had someone check it, and he did keep it pointed down and away from the court, which was good. So it shows that he knew a little bit about what he was doing, but he did use magazine and clip he used both of them. Yes, interchangeably. Thank you. So
now,
I was
the AR? Was it the actual AR that Rittenhouse had that they were using?
I don't know, because it really looked like a generic AR that both of them had, although Rittenhouse's, I looked at a picture today, Rittenhouse's had a scope on it, and this one did not.
Exactly.
Didn't have any sort of sights on it.
That's what I noticed. That's why I was asking. Yeah.
Butch, I think Butch has a comment about what kind of less lethal bullets we should be using. Rubber. I'm sorry. That's something that when I was in high school was kept in the wall and an entirely different type of attack. So,
oh my.
Let's see here.
Well, I mean, if you want to look at everybody who's been hit in the head with a rubber bullet, even though it's bounced off the road.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! At the Faster Saves Lives class over this summer, I got hit with a rubber ball, and I have a mark on my arm. I'll have to show it another time. I have a mark on my arm where I was hit, and it scabbed up, and there's a red mark there.
I think this
was.
Go ahead.
No, this was back in June.
Yeah.
This is a very long comment, so I'm going to have to. I'll put it up, but I'm going to have to read a good deal of it that is not going to make it on the screen. And I've heard this talked about before, but I want us to cover it. I think it's a very good one to cover. D says, my only issue is the fact that he had no business being there in the first place. Who authorized him to travel there from his home state with an AR-15 to help law enforcement? Who deputized him? If I was that, I did this, I think I can't help but think I will be under the jail. Let's be clear, he did have the right to defend himself, but he shouldn't have been there looking for a fight with an AR-15. And I am getting way bad noise from somebody's mic, and I don't know whose. Yeah, Rob, I'm getting really bad noise from your mic for some reason.
I think it started after you got that call.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There we go, and it went away.
Boom.
Let's talk about Dee's comment for a minute. The old saying, and I cannot. Somebody will remember, but my brain will not.
Stupid places.
Yeah, don't go stupid places with stupid people and do stupid things. I'm trying to remember where that came from, and I just can't. It's not Colonel Cooper, but it ought to be rule number 5.
Yeah, it sounds like a Farnhamism.
Yeah.
But okay, so I bring my med kit. They're beating people up and lighting things on fire, so I bring an AR because we want to defend businesses. What would you have him do, D? You say a handgun would be better?
He can't carry.
The kid was singled out and isolated and chased down. They brought the fight to him.
Yeah.
And when last I noticed, you don't need authorization to go from state to state.
Also, one thing that he worked in Kenosha. He lived 20 minutes. Yes, it was across state border, but he only lived 20 minutes away. So this was basically his hometown.
Well, as I understand it, he had a lot of family in Kenosha, including his dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, his dad and his grandparents live there. So it's not like it's not like he's hopping in the car and driving a half hour even. I live on a border town myself, and in 10 minutes I can be in another state. It's there's a lot of people in northern Massachusetts that drive up to New Hampshire to buy cigarettes because it's less expensive. And honestly, to tell you the truth, for a long time, Massachusetts had stupid blue laws that said you could not sell alcohol on Sundays. So people on the border states, on the border of New Hampshire, could keep their liquor stores open if they were within like 10 miles of the border, because otherwise they'd go across up to New Hampshire to buy it. So crossing the state lines, it's his town is right on the border, and I don't think it's that big of a deal. I mean, should he have not been there? Maybe, but I think a lot of people probably shouldn't have been there. I think there was a curfew and all that sort of stuff. So why should anybody have been there?
Donald Green made a great point. The rioters had no business being there either.
Yeah.
It was interesting, and if I said 3 people are going to chase you and try and attack you tonight during a demonstration, it wouldn't occur to me that I would get 3 guys with long criminal records and perhaps mental health issues. I wonder, and we'll probably never know, how those individuals were selected. Were they all part of Antifa or BLM? Were there other connections we don't get to ask? That's not part of this trial. Why were there, and to go to Donald's comment, why were those particular rioters there that night? Not germane to this trial, but an interesting question.
Charles says, you say he had a right to defend himself. What is the difference? Would it matter if he used an AR-15 or a 9mm semi-auto pistol? And to me, to me, it's a shame this had happened. I wouldn't myself want to be in charge of this mess. Right there with you, Charles. And honestly, it doesn't matter if he defended himself with a bow and arrow. He had the right to do it, and because he had the AR, that was obviously the best tool for him to do it with at the time. If he were, whatever tools he had the right to use.
Totally. And let's go back to the crying part. Okay, so he's on trial. He's 18. This happened when he was 17. He's legally a minor. He shot 3 people and killed 2 of them. Is there any one of us that wouldn't be overcome with emotions at 18 years old? Even at 28 or 38 years old, would we not be overcome with emotion after everyone's been attacking us and calling us a racist and a murderer for the last year, and then have to get in court and be like, hey, this is why I ended up firing on these people. I was in fear for my life. Would we not have some sort of a breakdown, whether it's PTSD or crying on the stand or anything like this? Well, and then what kills me the most is all of the people that continue to attack him for crying.
Yeah. Let's do this. We're at the bottom of the hour. Obviously, we're going to have to do another segment for news, but Chris is here. He's waiting for us, so I think we need to step aside to break. When we come back, we're going to interview Chris Cheng. Folks, hang on. We will be right back with that right after we hear from ACLDN.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. If you carry a defensive handgun, you need protection from the aftermath of prosecution. Even if you do everything right, you can be the victim of an overzealous prosecutor or even be falsely accused. That is where the ACLDN comes in. They provide immediate assistance when you need it most. If you find yourself under arrest, they immediately pay bail money and the retainer for your attorney. Additional funds are available for trial and civil proceedings. Beyond the money, they have far and away the best team in the industry, providing you invaluable information and training DVDs that are included with your membership. and who stand ready to work with your lawyer on your defense. People like Masad Ayub, John Farnham, James Fleming, Tom Givens, Emmanuel Capelson, Dennis Tueller, and led by Network President Marty Hayes. Initial membership is only $135 for your first year, and you get 8 incredible training DVDs and other educational material when you join. If you don't have tens of thousands of dollars to defend yourself at your disposal right now, you need to be a member of the ACLDN. Go to armedcitizensnetwork.org and become a member today. And please mention that you heard about them on the Polite Society podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the interview segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining us tonight, Chris Cheng. Chris is the winner of Season 4 of Top Shot on the History Channel, and he was on, help me, at the Big Show? No, it wasn't the Big Show. What was
the Go Big Show?
Okay. The Go Big Show, yes. And he is a Second Amendment activist. I met him when he was speaking at Gun Rights Policy Conference. He is absolutely a fantastic advocate for our rights. Chris, thanks for joining us tonight, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's good to see you all, and we're going to chat about guns and stuff, which is always a good time.
So let me get started with, you spoke to us at AmCon when we had the Alternative Mass Media Conference down in Dallas this past month. And I got to say, man, you were involved in something. Let's start with the Recoil magazine. You were on the cover, and that caused a little bit of a stir in the community. And then you took and did something that I thought was really cool. And you made a NFT, and I until you started talking about it, I didn't even know what those were. Let's go on that. What is an NFT, and what did you do with it, man?
Yeah, so NFT, it stands for non-fungible token, and sort of the technical parts aside, when you hear the letters NFT or non-fungible token, is basically this digital collectible platform that's new, and it essentially is a way to ascribe ownership of digital goods, and it's really taken the internet by storm, and it's a very exciting opportunity, I think, for the firearms community to connect to our followers, to advocate for the Second Amendment, and to also make this more fun. And one big example of success in the NFT world is with the NBA. So the NBA, they're taking video clips of all these basketball players, hitting game-winning three-pointers, amazing slam dunks, and they're selling these 15 to 30-second video clips as NFTs in the form of collector's cards. Right? So they are creating a fixed number of these NFT collector's cards, and they're selling them, and collectors are buying, trading, and selling these NFT videos, and people are having a lot of fun, people are making money, and I believe there's a similar future for the gun community with, if you can imagine, digital collector's cards of all of our favorite firearms, either in static pictures or in videos. The opportunities are truly endless, and it's something I think is going to bring a lot of fun and also really fundamentally change the way that we advocate for the Second Amendment and spread positive examples of gun culture.
Very cool. So now you did an NFT with your Recoil cover, right?
Yes. So about a month ago, we ran an auction format with, when I say we, it's me and Recoil magazine. We ran an auction of 10 rare copies of the cover art of issue 56, which is the magazine cover that I was on. And it was a provocative cover where I was representing the LGBT community and the Asian Pacific American community and advocating for this notion that the Second Amendment is for all. And with this auction, the results were phenomenal. I was really, really pleased with how they turned out. We raised $31,000 selling 10
my.
versions of the cover magazine, of the cover art. The number one bidder, the person who won serial number 1 of the NFT cover art, he bid $10,000 on that NFT, which is astounding. And it was the first ever of its kind NFT auction within the firearms community. And part of that $31,000, I'll be donating a portion of those proceeds to the Firearms Policy Coalition, to the Pink Pistols, which is an LGBT gun organization, and APA-GOA, which is a brand new Asian Pacific American gun owners association that I'm on the founding board of. And so, not only has the gun community taken in this new technology, right, in the form of NFTs or digital collectibles, but we raised money for pro-gun organizations. And I'm talking with Recoil about doing this again with other entities, other people, right, that have been featured on the cover of Recoil magazine. And I think there's a lot more opportunities as well. So I've got something else cooking in the oven that hopefully in a few months I can talk a little bit more about. But the Recoil auction with NFTs was really successful, and I'm really excited for the next steps and what the future is going to hold for us.
Very cool. Now, to be clear, we're not pitching something right now because you sold 10 and that's all there's going to be. Am I right on that?
Correct. Right. So, the way to kind of think about this is, whenever you're selling a rare edition of a thing, that's sort of, if you say you're going to make 10, then there's only going to be 10, right? I can't come back in a few months and be like, hey, everybody, I want to make another, 20 of them. It's like, nope, right? This is it. There's only 10 copies, right? 10 NFTs of the Recoil issue 56 cover art. We're never going to make any more because, right, if you make more of a thing that you said you were only going to make 10 of, well, that's going to devalue, right, the existing 10, and, right, we don't want to upset the current winners, right, like that. This is the promise, right, that we made, so we need to make good on our word and uphold the rarity of the collectible. So, the idea for these 10 winners is over time, as more NFTs, right, I'm 100% certain that over the coming years there will be more NFTs that are firearms related, that everyone's going to have an opportunity to buy, trade, and sell. And like any collector ecosystem, right, there will be a collector's market, right? And with any kind of ecosystem or economy or market, the prices will fluctuate, right? They will go up and they will go down depending on things that I do, things that Recoil does, activity in the firearms space and in our community. So again, this is a real fun way for us to interact with gun culture, with firearms. And for me, I've been a Second Amendment advocate for 10 years, and I was a professional shooter full time for 4 of those years, and that was a ton of fun. And advocacy is very rewarding, but to be very frank, advocacy is not always fun. Right, to be in the middle of fighting the gun control entities and getting disheartened at certain points where right, we're not always winning, right? This is a constant struggle, right? A constant fight for our rights, because at every turn, at the national, state, and local levels, we have anti-gun entities that are constantly fighting and who are well funded, trying to strip us of our rights. And so I'm very proud of the advocacy work that I've done, and obviously that many of us here, right, on this panel have also participated in. But I really want to bring more fun back into my life, into our lives when we're talking about gun culture, and right, that way it's not just about the serious fight that we're constantly, and the battles that we're engaged in, protecting our Second Amendment rights. So NFTs, and in general, you might have heard of this blockchain technology, which is related to cryptocurrency. There's this potential for cryptocurrency to unblock some of these barriers that the financial services system, right, has put up, where it really makes it difficult for FFLs and other firearms accessories manufacturers to sell legal goods, firearms related goods. And so, right, there's this other sort of potential for cryptocurrency to give us our own financial services platform, payment processing, right? So there's this tremendous opportunity, and we're at the very, very front edge of what I believe will be the next iteration of what the internet is going to look like, and these new fun opportunities, but also financial services, right, that can open up doors that are currently being closed off to us.
I'm going to go ahead and open up to my staff. Any of you guys want to ask any questions?
Well, you were talking about cryptocurrency. It was interesting. Just before we went on the air, the guy who is my webmaster, who hosts my blog, asked me if I had any interest in it because he also does payment processing as his way of supporting the hosting, and he was talking about crypto, making it available within the firearms industry. I think he was calling it Patriot Coin or something like that. But yeah, and I've heard of certain dealers that would accept Bitcoin or whatever.
Yeah, it's very exciting. One thing we're seeing in the cryptocurrency space is some Second Amendment or gun rights focused companies or organizations are creating their own coins, as they're called. Digital Arms is one company that has created what's called the Hunter token. So, they're trying to popularize the Hunter token, make it, one of, maybe one will be eventually one of the many kind of Pro 2A cryptocurrencies that are available where, it's sort of culture-focused currency. It's just a really fascinating way to think about currency, right? Because the current paradigm of currency, of money, is it's usually based around a country, right? The United States, we have the US dollar. Mexico has the Mexican peso, et cetera, but it's controlled by a central government or some kind of government entity. And cryptocurrency really just, it dismantles that whole model of a centralized currency, and where cryptocurrency allows for this decentralized model, right? Where there's no government that is in charge of the currency, right? And there's no government that can necessarily come in and dictate what types of transactions or which types of industries can and cannot transact within that cryptocurrency ecosystem. So, right, the fact that there's this opportunity for pro-gun entities to create our own currencies, and we can transact, right, in ways that we want to, right, with firearms-related goods and services. Again, right, it's a truly paradigm-changing way of how we can transact within this new cryptocurrency ecosystem.
One thing that I find intriguing about cryptocurrency is, and I only know the big ones, okay? I don't know, I'm not that involved in it, but for example, Bitcoin, they created so many Bitcoins and that's it, period. They can't go to the Federal Reserve and say, print another billion because we need more here. Print a trillion because we need more there. What is there, that's it, period. Almost like going back to the old gold standard. So theoretically, inflation shouldn't affect it as much.
Exactly. And you have some countries that have been hit really hard by inflation. They're considering moving off of their national currency, their national fiat currency, and adopting either a Bitcoin standard or Ethereum or other cryptocurrencies. And for these countries that decide to move in that direction, that is going to be fascinating. And I wouldn't be surprised if that happens in the next, 3 to 5 years. And, like you said, Paul, right, that is cryptocurrency is, I would say, much more protected against inflation because, like you said, a lot of these cryptocurrencies, they are fixing the number of coins that are created. And so, yeah, you can't just say we're going to create, X million or X billion, more coins. So yeah, that's a really great point to bring up about inflation.
Chris, how does somebody make an NFT? Like you said, the NBA is doing these 30-second videos. How do you decide what's NFT worthy, and how do you make one?
Yeah, great question. So to answer the question, right, how do you make an NFT? There's a number of companies that allow anyone to what's called minting an NFT. And basically you take whatever file you want to mint. It could be a JPEG picture, it could be a video clip, it could be an MP3, right? If you're talking about a music file, upload it to this, to this company's website, and they will mint the NFT for you, and they will charge you a nominal fee. Right, so anybody, with anywhere from a few pennies to a few dollars, sometimes the minting fees can be upwards of $60, $100, upwards of $200, but thankfully those fees are dropping dramatically. Right, we're soon going to be in a world where pretty much it'll just cost you a few pennies to mint an NFT. Now, to the second part of your question, Charlie, which is, I think that's a really, really great one, is how does one sell an NFT, right? And why would people pay more for one NFT versus another? I think the model to look at is just in the physical world, right? Why would let's take art for an example, because I think NFT art is kind of one of the hottest market segments right now. And, with art, anybody can create art, right? You can literally take a piece of paper, a white piece of paper, and take some crayons and, make some drawing. But why would anybody pay for that? This is where it comes down to the artists, right? It's either the artist marketing their artwork and explaining, right, telling the story, right? What is unique about their art? And then, of course, the other side is the buyer demand end of the spectrum. And you got to have buyers, right, who are interested in that art, right? And what is the story? And you've got to have buyers who are willing to pay money for that art. So while anybody can create an NFT, anybody can create a piece of art similarly, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's value unless you create that value. And I think a lot of that value creation, when it comes to art specifically, right, there's not necessarily a lot of utility around art. It's much more of a subjective feeling dynamic, like why is one song more popular than another? It's very much about, right, how does that song, how does that music resonate and connect with people, right? Maybe it's the melody, maybe it's the lyrics, but this is where the artist, right, has a responsibility to promote and tell the story around their art, and therefore, right, giving a reason for buyers to ascribe value to that artwork.
Chris, we're at the end of our segment. Can I have you hang out for one more segment with us, man?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, folks, we are going to step aside to break. We're going to hear from CNJFO. We'll be right back right after this.
New Jersey is a civil rights wasteland where an unconstitutional law known as justifiable need keeps ordinary citizens from exercising their right to bear arms. New Jersey spits in the eye of freedom, ignores the Bill of Rights and the Heller decision. New Jersey politics are an anti-civil rights bulldozer and a spreading cancer. The Coalition of New Jersey Firearms Owners, a tax-exempt nonprofit, has a goal to defeat justifiable need, reverse course on all anti-freedom laws, and render aid to other jurisdictions by filing Supreme Court-bound litigation. CNJFO is a beacon of freedom behind the Iron Curtain in New Jersey. Join CNJFO's strong, enthusiastic patriots. Support the Coalition of New Jersey Firearms Owners today. Protect all our rights and return freedom to the Garden State. To donate or learn more, go to cnjfo.com.
Okay, we are back with the second interview segment with Chris Cheng. Chris, and I suppose I should actually push that button so Chris appears on screen.
I'm back.
Yes. I wanted to talk, we covered the NFT. I want to talk about the other thing that we've heard about from you recently, and that is you and well, Amy. I know Amy Dillon's involved in it, but and that's how I found out about it. Was you and Amy appearing on the Armed Society a while back? But there has been created, and you're a founding person on the board, a Asian American gun rights organization. Pardon me, I don't have the name right in front of me, and my brain isn't what it used to be. I cannot remember it off the top of my head, but I think it's awesome that the people are competent enough that they can break off. For example, the old white guys like Rob and me and John, and especially Charlie, we're well represented in gun rights.
I'm the youngest guy here.
you don't think...
Who gave Paul a shovel?
When you don't think of Asian Americans right off the top of your head when you think NRA, when you think SAF, but they need to be represented because especially in these post-COVID times, or hopefully it's now soon post-COVID, but Asian Americans have been very much victims of hate crime. And I'm glad to see this come about, that there is a Asian American centered gun rights organization. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the name of the organization is APAGOA, and it stands for Asian Pacific American Gun Owners Association. And we were founded a few months ago back in April, and this was in response to the rise in racist hate crimes against Asian Pacific Americans across our country. And it's been so disheartening to see criminals targeting Asian Americans for violence simply because of the color of our skin. And most of these attacks have been on, just Asian Americans. They're just literally walking down the street, going to the grocery store, taking a walk around the block. And even more sickening is that the elderly have been prime targets. And for me, that really struck a nerve, right, to see the elderly in our society being targeted. And it's just literally one of the most disgusting low-level crimes I think that anybody can commit in any society, right? If you go after, the young, or if you go after the elderly, it's just a special circle of hell, right, for that type of criminal. So APAGOA was formed in response to these hate crimes. And it's been a fantastic experience seeing the level of interest from Asian Americans who are interested in learning how to learn safe firearms handling, how to purchase their first firearm, where do they go learn how to shoot. Now, where I think it gets very interesting is an approach that we're taking is we have learned that there are many Asian Americans and green card holders who are non-native English speakers, right? And so what's interesting about that is, we've heard many testimonials of Asian Americans who have gone to a gun store or have gone to a gun range, and their English proficiency is, not at a native level, but they want to learn how to shoot. They want to purchase their first firearm, but there's no one at the gun shop or the gun range who can help them. And so what happens is they have a poor experience, right? And then they learn nothing, and they end up going home empty-handed and not learning or not experiencing what they were there to experience. So we are focusing on translating the safe handling rules for firearm safety, and we're working on recruiting and training firearms instructors in Asian languages as a way to connect with these Asian Americans and make sure that if you want to go learn how to shoot or go purchase your firearm, that language is not going to be a barrier for you. And I think what's interesting for me, just from a very personal perspective, I used to come from a place where I believed if you live in America that you should speak English. Now, I still believe that should be true. However, when it comes to the right of self-defense, I don't believe that you should have to speak English, right, to exercise your right to self-defense. I don't think you should have to speak English to own a firearm, right? So, my own personal beliefs were challenged, and I think they've been challenged in a good way. And I've come to a place where, look, we have to face some of these realities that if you aren't proficient in English, well, we can't just say, too bad, you're going to have to fend for yourself in some other way. And look, if you are an American citizen, or if you're naturalized and you have the constitutional right to own a firearm, well, we need to meet people where they are. It's very similar to me, the right to vote, right? Hey, look, like, you probably should learn English, right, to be able to vote. But the reality is, like, in this country, right, you can have translated voting materials, right, in many languages. There's other services available out there to help translate ballots for you. And I feel like APA-GOA, we have a similar opportunity to translate those materials or provide that instruction in foreign language as well, and really make a notable difference for Asian Pacific Americans. And again, the end game here is to broaden the tent, right, to expand the reach of constitutional rights, of American values, and to connect with more people in the gun rights movement.
I've said for a long time, Rob and I have talked about this ever since Rob came on board. Gun rights are human rights. They're not just constitutional, they are human rights. And I don't care if you're Asian American, African American, Indian American, Native American. If you're an American, you have the right to defend yourself. That's
Chris,
you're about to say something.
In the land of out there with cryptocurrency, wouldn't you love to see self-defense tourism? You fly into a training school, you're instructed in your native language on how to handle a firearm. And then because of constitutional carry in this state, you can then carry as you leave. By the way, when we go drinking tonight, all that gets put away except, tonight's your night to be the designated driver and the designated defender. Welcome to real gun culture. How far away do you think that is?
That's a great question, Rob, and you're actually hitting the nail on the head of one of our initiatives that we want to pursue, which is, Asian tourists come to America and they spend hundreds of millions, and I actually want to find the number. I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the billions of dollars a year, right, that Asian tourists spend here in the United States. And what's happening is, right, Asian tourists, right, they're going to their local tour guide, companies, right, and they're saying, hey, right, I want to fly to Las Vegas, right, I want to have a week in Vegas, and they're basically telling the tour operator, hey, right, I want to go see the Hoover Dam, I want to go, do this and do that. It's like kind of literally checking boxes next to price tags. The experience that I want to add, yeah, exactly. The experience I want to add to all of these tour lists is learn how to shoot a gun, right? And if you're a Chinese tourist, right, come, APA-GOA, I want us to be able to connect these tour groups with Chinese language firearms instructors, and not only help these ranges, but then if you think about, right, what kind of impact could we have?
Right.
If we're training Chinese tourists, right, how to shoot guns, and then they go back to their country, right? They go back to China, and they're talking about how I shot a gun in Las Vegas, and it was in Mandarin, and it was amazing. Like, that is a very, very impactful way for us to spread American values and about, right, this concept of human rights, the civil rights notion, right, that self-defense is a civil right, and right, self-defense with a firearm, right, is a civil right. So that's another thing we're very excited about. We're having some very initial planning discussions, but that's something that I hope in a few years that I can come back, on the show and hopefully say that we have some good results.
It's a different show than the one you were on, where you pitch your latest business idea, and all you need is a $500,000 startup. Chris, I remember in graduate school, the Asian community is not all the same. If you want to find out, make the mistake of calling a Korean or a Japanese a Chinese, because wow, you just stepped on. I mean, it's a little bit like calling a Scot an Irishman. They'll straighten you out because you got it wrong. And in some sense, we're lumping them all together. Very distinct cultures. Are they united by America?
It's a very good question. And yeah, I mean, Rob, you hit the nail on the head too, right? So, right, when we say Asian, it's not the singular monolithic identity. The Chinese are very different than the Japanese, than the Koreans, than the Thais, etc. And so, right, to your question, does America and American values unite all these different, ethnic backgrounds, ethnic Asian backgrounds? I think the answer is a little bit, and it really depends. For example, like any immigrant community, a lot of there's Chinatowns and Japantowns and Little Korea, kind of thing in many cities across the country. And so, there's this natural tendency, right? And we saw this, right, with Irish Americans or German Americans, right, in centuries, ago, and obviously a lot of right, German towns, etc. Right, those communities persist, right, even in today's time. And so, I think there's always been this challenge for Asian Americans who grow up in sort of a Chinatown culture community to really connect with the broader American society and culture. And, for someone like me, I grew up in Orange County in Southern California, and I grew up in a very diverse area. I had, a lot of white friends, a lot of Latino friends, a number of black friends, so I didn't live in an insular Asian American experience. So, but I have a lot of friends who did. Right, so I've kind of looked at my life as being a chameleon, right, where I can basically blend in and I understand these different cultures and can context switch, right? I will interact with a Chinese American who's lived like a more Chinatown experience. I'll interact with that kind of Chinese American very differently than a Chinese American like myself, right, who maybe grew up in a more like diverse area. And I think I make that point because I think it's always important, right? Like it's easy for us to stereotype, any kind of, any group of people. And sometimes, right, that's useful, right? Because we want to understand what are some general trends and tendencies for certain groups. However, especially when it comes to gun rights and firearms culture, for me, I always zero in on the individual, right? Who am I talking to? Who's literally in front of me right now? And if I have somebody very specific, an individual in front of me, right, I don't talk in generalities, right? I want to understand what is this specific person's experience with firearms, what's their perspectives, what are their fears, what are they excited about, right? And then we can, then I can craft a bespoke experience or a bespoke conversation about firearms, right, where I'm not throwing necessarily all the talking points about why assault weapons are a terrible idea or why universal background checks are silly and ineffective, right? It's like we can all like hit those talking points, but right, we should really, I think, be focused on tailored conversations depending on who we're specifically talking to. And Asian Americans, right, talking to a Chinese American is very different than talking to a Korean American, which is very different than talking to a Filipino American. And here's why. Filipinos, as an example, right, the Philippines, they already have a concept of personal firearms ownership. So they get it, right? They get it at a more fundamental than many Chinese Americans, right, who maybe don't have family members who immigrated from China and have their own personal firearms. So, right, there's some sort of historical and contextual knowledge that can be relevant. But again, just because you're Filipino American also doesn't mean that you are pro-gun, right? Or that your family has owned a firearm, or you have a tradition or a heritage around firearms ownership. But it can be a key, right, into understanding what that individual's experience might be like. Or you can use that information as an anchor, right? If you're Filipino American and you don't know that there are hundreds of thousands of Filipino Americans that own guns, I can drop that knowledge on a Filipino American who may not know that and be like, oh, hey, this isn't such a weird thing, right? This concept of Filipinos owning guns is a super common thing right here in the gun community. And that can bring a lot of comfort, right, to people who may not necessarily know that.
Well, Chris, we are at the end of the segment. Again, these do go by really fast. If somebody's interested in finding out about what you're doing, how can they get more information, man?
Yeah, absolutely. So anyone who's interested in APA-GOA, we have a website, apagoa.org, and lots of updates, coming from the website. We're also on social media, different handles with APA-GOA. And then anyone who wants to stay in touch with me and what I'm up to, I'm at topshotchris.com, and on most of the social media platforms, and my handle is at TopShotChris.
Chris, again, thank you so much for coming on tonight. It's always fun talking to you, man.
Great, yeah. Thanks for having me on. Always great being on the show, and good to see all your faces. And hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
All right,
thanks so much.
Good to see you.
Take care, everybody.
We're going to step aside to break. We will be back right after we hear from JPFO. Hang on, everybody. Right back with another news segment after this.
In 1928, Germany required its citizens to register their firearms, making possible Hitler's 1938 Nazi Weapons Act, disarming all Jews. Now ask yourself, what is the real consequence of registration? All in favor of gun control, raise your right hand. Brought to you by Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership, America's aggressive civil rights organization. JPFO.org.
Welcome back. This is the second news segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. We've had a lot of comments that came in when Chris was here, and I'm sorry I didn't get very many of them on. They just the delay between what we were talking about, what the comments were talking about, was just, it would have been herky-jerky for me to get them in. But I do thank everybody for commenting while he was on the air. Guys, this is our second news segment. We got the Rittenhouse thing pretty well covered. One thing that I want to talk about that's in show notes for news, I don't think this had happened yet last week when we were on the air. Remington officially has said we're moving our headquarters and everything out of New York. We're going to Georgia, man.
Yeah. I don't know that they're going to close the Ilion plant because they've brought back about 350 workers, but they're going to have their world headquarters, their research and development facilities, and, quote, a world-class manufacturing facility in LaGrange, which is, 50, 60 miles from Atlanta. Just north of Fort Benning, actually.
Okay, very cool. Let's see, what else do we want to talk about in here? Oh, yeah, that we talked about this one. I know I've talked about this once before. Cannot remember what day it was or who I talked about it with, but the AFT, Biden's AFT, to the rest of us, we call it the ATF, processed over 500,000, 550,000 comments on unfinished frames and receivers and stabilizing braces. They did that with 50 agents, and if they would have, doing the math, if they had an 8-hour workday, and just like the rest of us, 60 minutes in every hour, they had to, every person doing it had to process 2 comments a minute to get that done. Do you think maybe there was some glossing over there? I think there probably was.
Well, yes and no. This is an industry, Paul. If you write your congressman, they're not reading it. They want to get the subject, the pertinent bill, for or against. It's a checkbox. You're done. I don't care if you've written a beautiful magnum opus. All they need is that information. Here's the bill. I'm against it. Next box. So, yeah, all you're doing is skimming it. Got him. Hit the checkbox and move on. What bothers me is, why can't they then process other applications with similar speed? I'll take 500,000 silencer applications completed in how many days did this take?
2 weeks.
Yeah, it was a couple weeks.
Let's get rid of that backlog, fellas. Keep going.
Well, it took me about 6 to 7 months to get my amendment approved. I already had the permit, had the tax stamp. Just to vary it a little took at least 6 to 7 months.
Wow.
Sure, I'm glad that right delayed isn't denied.
Exactly. But going back to the comments, they may have said they processed that, but what was submitted then becomes part of the legal record, and they could just say for or against, but what you brought out in your comment will go into the court cases, or it can't be brought up.
Going back to the Remington, maybe we'll get some new top-notch firearms out of Big Green. As long as they don't do another R-51, man, that's all I care. I really wanted to like that gun so bad. That was a good-looking gun, but garbage. Was that external? I'm sorry. All right.
Can we talk about one other thing here, Paul? The state of Virginia,
yes,
for our last licks. Do you have time?
Go for it. We've got about 3 minutes.
The state of Virginia has been reporting to the National Instant Background Check System, and 46,000 Virginians lost their right to buy firearms because of a quirk of the bureaucracy. Now, there's a quirk in Virginia law. It states that if you seek voluntary mental health commitment, you lose the right to buy a firearm in Virginia. That leaves you within the federal laws, howsoever. So if you go to another state, you could buy a firearm there. Well, except for this problem. Citizens who went through voluntary commitment would then be marked by the Commonwealth of Virginia as if they were involuntarily committed. They ignored that distinction. They had to be sued to get the message. And when somebody said, okay, now go find all the ones that were miscategorized, 46,000 Virginians.
Wow.
The good news is they got their rights back. The bad news is we had to fight with some bureaucrats to get it done properly.
Now, voluntary commitment, does that for mental health, does that include things like, man, I got to get off these drugs. I got to dry out. I got to get help getting off alcohol. Are those included?
My family was just killed and I was injured. I'm now addicted to antidepressants. I need to commit myself. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I did bring this to Jake Wiskerson, who is part of Walk the Talk America. I've forgotten his title there. Because there are a number of mental health organizations who want to remove the stigma for mental health treatment so that people who are suffering from mental health problems will go get treatment. Paul, lots of people with strokes suffer depression because it's like a car crash. Part of you that you depended on isn't there, and you struggle with this change in your condition. If help can help, go get it. We want to remove the stigmas, not add more.
Just I've always been an open book to anybody that's tuned into ours. I'd be lying to you if I said I've had no struggles with depression since my stroke. I have had struggles with depression. I've not checked myself into mental health facilities, but have I struggled with depression since I've had my stroke? You bet your bottom dollar I have.
It would be unbelievable if you hadn't. It would be just like someone who, I used to use my right arm and I have a stroke and can't use it. Of course I'm depressed. Entirely understandable.
All right, let's do this because we're at quarter after the hour, and I want to try to still get the show in 90 minutes-ish. We're probably going to be late, but let's take our last break. We're going to combine the DGU and the What Have You Been Up To in Media segment. We're going to do those into one segment. We'll get to that segment right after this. As soon as I find the right button, and that's the button.
It all failed before. Alcohol prohibition brought us organized crime, and no less alcohol. Drug prohibition brought us murderous, no-knock, wrong-house raids.
Police! Search warrant!
No, wait! The crack house is next door!
Now gun prohibitionists want laws to lead us down that same path. Don't Americans ever learn? Just ask yourself, isn't government the only beneficiary of police-state policies? Brought to you by Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership. Information available at jpfo.org.
Welcome back to the final segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. These discussions are not legal advice. Some of us are trainers, but this is not formal training, and you need formal training. The defensive gun use segment is intended as information, not as training. As always, the opinions of the hosts are only their own opinions and not those of any sponsors or other affiliations. Rob, I see you got your name on the Oceanside, California one.
Been there, used to live right next to it. We've heard that no one needs more than 10 rounds in a firearm. This should make you say, not so fast. There were 2 intruders in what's described as a pre-dawn invasion robbery. When patrol officers arrived at the scene, they found a 31-year-old suspect suffering what would soon turn out to be mortal wounds. Other officers pulled over a vehicle which had 5 occupants, including one with a gunshot wound. It's unknown if that wounded victim was shot during the home invasion or by one of his compatriots in the car who had bad muzzle discipline. In that case, the wounded suspect is in stable condition. So anyone who knows ballistics and firearms lethality knows that averaging 1 round per attacker is not a good plan. We got 5 in the car, 2 back at the scene of the crime. Yikes. What I always think of is, why do police like a pretty substantial loadout? Because they don't know what's around the corner.
Yeah.
That's right.
Really, I mean, if 5 people are coming at my house, I want that 30-round magazine in my AR-15. That's what I want to start with.
Okay.
You know, I say this all the time to the people here in occupied territory, that they should buy themselves a Glock and spend the money on a high-cap magazine, pre-1994 magazine, and carry 15 rounds or 17 rounds. Keep that in your home defense gun, because you don't know how many people are going to attack you, and you don't know how many times you're going to have to shoot these people.
Yeah, and if you had just used the shotgun and you bought what's called a duckbill accessory so that it spreads out the shot, can you imagine what that prosecutor would say? Oh, he got the special accessory so he could kill more people.
Right. I have seen at a gun store? I have seen a duck-billed pistol that has like 4 or 5 barrels on it. It's like some old thing. It's pretty cool.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it looks like something. It looks like Leonardo da Vinci designed a handgun. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's like a handgun that's got 4 barrels on it. They all kind of spread out.
All righty then. And let me lean back on Masada Ayub's, I call it one of his truisms. Every bullet has a lawyer attached to it. So before you think something like that is a good choice for home defense, make sure that every projectile you send, you know where it's going.
Paul, can I comment on that for a minute?
Yep.
We talked about a DGU where a defensive gun use where someone, crazy woman, is shooting at a neighbor's. She's parked on the street, shooting at the house across the street. The neighbor on her side sees her doing this and shoots her. I walked out of my house and I looked at the street and I went, wow. My entire horizon is occupied by residences. There can be a lot of space between the homes, but that bullet's going to go a long way, and it's going to continue to travel until something stops it. Mm-hmm. The joke in Kansas is it's going to hit a home eventually, right? Because it's just so darn flat. Well, a lot of pieces of suburbia look like that.
Yeah, and, well, specifically, Louisiana isn't known for its mountain ranges.
I've got a book called The Hills of Louisiana.
It's a pamphlet.
Exactly.
All right, let's go on to the next one. Charlie, you got the Portland, Oregon one, man.
All right, this comes to us from Portland, Oregon. Road rage participants do crazy stuff, and it has been a while since we've done a story like this. So don't bring a sword to a gunfight. The incident was filmed by a bystander and shows the attacker approaching the other driver and brandishes a samurai sword while the other driver was climbing out of his car. The sword bearer takes several steps toward the other driver, who calmly walks around to his trunk, which he had already popped, and he pulls out an AR-15 and begins to load the magazine in the rifle. The swordsman decided it was a bad idea and a bad knife, a bad sword, and so he decided to not engage with the man with the AR and left the driver alone.
Smart decision. And one of the best types of DGUs, the best type of DGUs, not a shot was fired. I love those.
Mm-hmm. This is true. So always, what does Rob always say? Win the race to the 911 call?
Yes.
I actually started using that in one of my classes this weekend.
Wow. I'm trying to remember who it was. John Murphy talks about the monkey dance. Guys posturing to intimidate each other.
I thought that was Rory Miller, but okay.
Okay, sure. I've never taken a class with Rory. I have talked to John. I'm sorry for the wrong footnote. If somebody did that dance to me with a sword, he'd be shot. The fact that this guy was so cool is phenomenal. I don't know whether it meant that he was effectively disarmed while the guy was doing the dance and he wanted to de-escalate until he was armed, or whether this guy has just got extraordinary presence of mind. Look at the video, you decide.
Yeah, I'm looking at the pictures and it's like there was no space. It wasn't like the guy was half a block away. This guy was right next to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I watched the video and it looked like it was a rubber sword. So I don't even know if this guy, like, it was in Portland, Oregon, so maybe this guy's on drugs, you know what I mean?
You think?
Quite likely. Maybe he's a member of city council, you know?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Oh, mercy, mercy, mercy.
All right.
Yeah, this.
John Lateen makes a great point, and whoops, push the right button again. I'm having a problem with hitting the right buttons tonight. I'm sorry. John says, could he just drive away? You know, that's for those of you who watch often, if you're in control of a vehicle and you can get out of there, get out of there. Your vehicle is both a better escape tool and a better weapon than anything that fires projectiles.
This is true.
So, and let me go back to Robert. This is going to reach back to the news segment, but don't bring a skateboard to a gunfight.
Right.
Pete says the best situation is if police arrive before you need to shoot. Always call 911 first. If you can, great. It used to be when you actually had keypads on phones. I know we're going back a long time to flip phones, like the 90s, but you didn't have to look at your phone to dial it. I've got to look at my phone. Give me a second here. I got to bring it up and power it up, or unlock it.
Doesn't it have a rotary dial on it, Paul?
No, but I don't know that. I mean, if I'm going to dial 911, I got to look to see where the 911, because I
Right.
can't just feel where it is.
Gotcha.
So if I'm trying to pay attention to somebody in front of me, I don't want to hope I get 911 out of the call. I
could end up with 411
down at the phone. Yeah, exactly. I don't want to be looking down at the phone trying to get, while my attention needs to be on the bad guy. So if you can, Pete, absolutely dial 911 first, because that accomplishes one more thing. It paints you as the victim when you're the first one to call 911.
Yep.
Any more we need to talk about on DGUs?
I think that was it.
I think we're good. So, Rob, let's rather than going to break, let's talk about Slowfax. What's been going on there lately, man?
I've been busy. Let me recommend 3 new posts there for you. One's called Gun Ownership versus Crime in the U.S., the 2000 to 2019. We've all seen that graph that says, here's how gun ownership has increased and here's how crime has decreased. The most recent one I could find was 6-7 years ago, so I updated it myself. The reason being obvious, I wanted to use that in an article, and the data wasn't available. The next article is called Dangerous Cities and Guns, 2021, followed by Death, Life, and Gun Prohibition in 2021. I'm hoping I have to date that, because I'm hoping the Supreme Court changes the landscape. Short story, we have had gun control for more than the last century, and we can see if it looks just by looking at history. And if the last 23,000 firearms regulations didn't bring us peace, the next million won't either. That's at slowfax.wordpress.com, and I also wrote the Armed Citizen column at Ammo Land. John, tell us about your blog, Only Guns and Money.
Well, we cover this a little bit, but the company that bought the old Remington, Rim Arms, is moving their global headquarters to LaGrange, Georgia. They're also building a factory and research facility there, and it was a big announcement. The governor of Georgia welcomed them, etc. The New York plant, from what I understand, will stay open for the foreseeable future. I also wrote about a secret tape from a meeting of NRA officials after Columbine. It was obtained by NPR. The powers that be were worried that if they only held a meeting of members, no exhibits, they would only get nuts, fruitcakes, and hillbillies attending. Well, this Appalachian American took offense to that. That led David Codrea to opine that maybe the NRA should have had a moonshine club instead of a wine club. That and more is at onlygunsandmoney.com. He actually called it a shine club.
That's even more country.
So, Charlie, man, riding shotgun with Charlie. Are we still doing weekly? Or are we back down to 2 weeks? Or what are we doing?
We're back to doing 2 weeks, but I actually just looked at the November schedule. It looks like there's 5 Tuesdays in November. The show I put out last week was with a woman from New Jersey. Her name is Heidi Bergman-Schock, and she is at the state level with the DC Project, and she is also with the Well-Armed Woman. She's an instructor, and it was a lot of fun having her on the show. Next week, since it is the anniversary of the Kennedy assassination, I'll be putting out the show with Ashley Lubinsky, and she and I went down to Dealey Plaza. And she said she didn't know much about the Kennedy assassination conspiracies, and I told her I think I knew enough for the both of us. But she takes some time to talk about how she thinks the government may have lost Lee Harvey Oswald's rifle. So that's going to be coming up next week on Riding Shotgun with Charlie. Paul, how about yourself?
We've got coming up tomorrow on the Daily Bullet is our every Tuesday is with Craig DeLuz. We'll be talking about the events of the day. Wednesday coming up, Dan Waz. Thursday is going to be Mike Piwowarski. And Friday, Alex Uli returns after his week off, and we'll be talking. The one I really want to push about what's coming up, though, is Saturday. We're going to be restarting the Weekly Bullet. I am very excited. It's a 1-hour news program. Everything that's happened in the week in news, Mike Piwowarski and I will be covering it, and we'll have Teresa Einacker of CNJFO on. I imagine we'll be talking a lot about the Rittenhouse trial because that's going to be decided tomorrow or the next day. Let's be realistic about it. So we'll be getting that in. But tune in where you're watching now, either on the SAF Facebook or YouTube channel. That's where we'll be Saturday at noon Central Time, the only time zone that matters. So, all right. I think that kind of. I want to get. We got 3 comments, all by Michael Schmidt. I want to get to them because they're really quick. I want to get some comments in. He says iPhones will dial 911 without being unlocked. You know what? So will Android phones. And he says, and then dial emergency contacts. I don't know if the Android will dial emergency contacts or not, but I know an Android will dial 911 without being unlocked. And he says, I've butt dialed 911 more than once. Imagine that conversation. 911, what's your emergency? Oh, sorry, man. I just did not mean to call you. That I'm sure won't go over. You know, they have to get that. They have to get that fairly regularly, but it's got to be. It's still got to be checked out. Just like if you were to dial 911 from a landline and just hang up, the police are showing up, but it's not going to take. It's not going to be 3 days from now. At least in my jurisdiction, it is where I live. They're going to be there, and they're going to be there in a reasonable amount of time. Not fast enough to save you if something's gone really wrong. But.
No.
All right. Let me see. Yeah, we're all caught up in comments, so I need to switch over to show notes here and come down here and say that this does wrap up another episode of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. I'd like to thank Chris Cheng for joining us today. So for Amy, Dana, Tracy, John, Susan, Amanda, Robin, Charlie, and Rob.
Until next time,
stay safe.
Be aware.
And we'll see you down the road.
The views and opinions on the show you just heard are those of the host and the guest and are not necessarily the views of any sponsors or other affiliations. But hey, not everyone is as smart as we are.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for staying with us. And I'm going to go ahead and shut the stream down now. Again, 5 p.m. Central Time, the only time zone that matters. Join me the rest of the week at noon on Saturday. Thanks again, everybody.